Wyoming Territory, 1888. Lucas McCain walked the cracked earth of his homestead, the shotgun slung loosely over his shoulder. The late afternoon sun bled a bruised orange over the plains, and a dry wind kicked up dust devils around his boots. He'd come out to check the traps he'd set for rabbit and coyote, but instead found a boy of no more than 6, his face streaked with dirt, and his small hands filled with eggs from the henhouse. Lucas paused, his gaze cool and steady. "You planning on starting your own flock, or did the wind blow you in?" The boy froze, his head snapping up. He clutched the eggs closer, his eyes wide and dark with a panic. Lucas understood well. He was ready to bolt. But he held his ground. A woman emerged from behind the chicken coop, her clothes ragged, and her dark hair a tangled mess. Her face was gaunt, and her eyes held a weariness that settled deep in Lucas's gut. "He ain't a thief," she said, her voice thin but sharp as a hawk's cry. "He was just hungry." "Eggs don't fill a stomach for long," Lucas said, his tone flat. He motioned with the barrel of his shotgun toward the boy. "That one yours?" "He's my brother," she said, stepping forward. "We're alone." Lucas took a long look at her. She was maybe 20, but she moved with a kind of defeat that aged a person faster than time. Her boots were worn to the soles, and a threadbare shawl was wrapped tight around her shoulders. "You got a name?" "Clara," she said. "Well, Clara," Lucas said, leaning the shotgun against the coop. "You've got 2 options. You can work for your supper, or you can keep walking." Clara's jaw tightened. She looked at him with an intensity that surprised him. "What kind of work?" "My ranch needs a cook, a hand with the chores," he said. "Or if you prefer, the circuit judge is due in a couple of weeks. He can solemnize a union." Her eyes widened, a flicker of something close to fear in them. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Lucas said, his gaze unwavering. "You didn't run, and you didn't try to lie. That's more than I can say for most folks I've met." Clara looked away, her eyes glistening. Lucas felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years. A flicker of hope. He wasn't a sentimental man, but he saw something in her that resonated with his own solitude. "You and your brother can stay in the bunkhouse. We'll figure the rest out later." She stared at him, suspicion warring with a bone-deep exhaustion. "You're serious?" "I don't play at charity, Clara. I'm a man of my word." A long, silent breath escaped her, as if she'd been holding it for years. "All right," she whispered. "We'll work." Lucas nodded, and watched her walk away, her back straight and her shoulders squared. She walked as if to convince herself she wasn't dreaming. When she was out of sight, he picked up the eggs she had dropped and carried them to the kitchen. The rooster crowed behind him, an affirmation of the quiet deal they had made. An hour later, Lucas stood on the porch. Clara returned, the boy clinging to her hand. He was small and pale, with a tuft of sandy hair sticking out from beneath a tattered cap. "This is Leo," Clara said. "Welcome," Lucas said, his voice softer than he'd intended. Leo just stared at him, his thumb in his mouth. Inside the bunkhouse was Spartan but clean. "You'll have to share the bed," he said. "It's dry and the stove holds heat." Clara looked around, her shoulders slumping with relief. "Thank you," she said, the words barely a whisper. "Come to the main house when you're settled," Lucas said. "We'll see about a meal." Clara hesitated. "You really meant it? About the work or the other thing?" "I don't say things I don't mean," Lucas said, his eyes meeting hers. "Then I'll work," she said. Lucas gave a curt nod. "Good, let's start with lunch." That afternoon she moved through his kitchen with a quiet efficiency that spoke of years spent at a stove. The children sat outside on the porch eating corn cakes and watching the chickens. Lucas watched her from across the room. "You from around here?" he asked. "No, from Texas," she said without looking up. "Our parents passed 2 years ago. We came north because there was nothing left for us." He nodded, the quiet between them a comfortable thing. Outside the wind rustled the leaves of a lone cottonwood tree. "You've got a gift for cooking," he said. "I had to feed my brother and myself," she said, a small wry smile on her lips. "Hunger's a good teacher." That night after the children were asleep, Lucas found Clara standing outside the bunkhouse wrapped in her thin shawl. He brought her a thick wool blanket. "Nights get cold," he said, handing it to her. "Thank you," she said, her fingers brushing his. "We did good today. We did, he agreed. I was terrified when you found us, she said, her expression soft but weary. I thought you'd shoot. I thought about it, he said, his tone dry. She laughed, a low, surprised sound that warmed the cold air. You're not what I expected, she said, her smile fading into something gentler. No one ever is, he said. He looked out at the vast, silent land. Everyone's just trying to hold on to something. Clara's eyes stayed on him, and for the first time the fear in them seemed to recede. Good night, Lucas, she said. Good night, Clara. As he walked away, the stars seemed a little brighter, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to believe something might finally endure. The next morning Clara was up before the rooster. The bunkhouse floorboards groaned beneath her bare feet as she stoked the fire. Leo slept soundly beside her, his small hand tucked into hers. She pulled the quilt tighter around him and stepped outside. The sun hadn't crested the ridge yet, but the dawn light had a cool blue quality. Lucas was already in the barn, his shoulders wide as he brushed down the gray gelding. He didn't turn when she approached. Coffee's on the stove. You can start with the cornmeal. I can do more than that, she said, her voice calm and even. He paused, looking over his shoulder. You offering for the kitchen or for what else needs doing? For what needs doing, she said, her eyes not flinching from his. He gave a slow nod and returned to the horse. There's a tear in the work shirt, on the second peg in the storehouse. By the time the sun had climbed above the ridge, Clara had 2 loaves rising on the back of the stove, the children fed and dressed, and a pile of mended linens folded neatly beside the wood bin. She moved with a purpose, her body remembering the rhythm of work. Leo played in the dirt with small stones, humming to himself. Lucas worked the eastern fence line until midday, then came in with dust on his clothes. Horse stepped wrong, Clara asked, as he washed up at the basin. Rusty post gave out, he said, accepting the plate of cornbread and beans she offered. He sat across from her without invitation. The children were napping in the shade near the porch, Leo using his sister's skirt as a pillow. Lucas ate, swallowed, then said, You've been around livestock before. Some. My father raised mules, she said. Think you can handle a team? She met his gaze. I can learn fast, he nodded. I'll need to haul lumber from town come Friday. Clara traced the grain in the tabletop. You ever been married? He didn't answer right away. No, thought about it once. She left for the city before I could ask. Why didn't you follow her? She wanted paved streets. I've got dirt in my boots. Clara let that settle. My parents were quiet folk. They died of the fever. We tried to stay with some kin, but they were full up. I figured the frontier was better than starving where folks knew you. Lucas nodded once. You're strong. I'm still here, she said. That's all. They ate in a comfortable silence. When the sun began to dip, Lucas saddled the gelding and led it toward the creek. Clara was chopping carrots by the stove, but she looked up as he passed. I'll check the line traps, back before dark. You want me to keep supper warm? She asked. He paused, adjusting the saddle. You could come with me. She hesitated for only a moment. And the children? They'll be safe here, he said, gesturing to his loyal hound lying by the hearth. I left my dog with them. She wiped her hands and followed him out. They rode in silence at first. The mare Lucas saddled for her was steady-footed. You always this quiet? She asked. Not much to say when a man lives alone, he said. You still do? She asked, her fingers tightening on the reins. He looked at her, a hint of a smile on his face. Not anymore. Her fingers tightened on the reins, but she didn't look away. They reached the traps just before dusk. Lucas knelt by the snare, freeing a fat rabbit. You ever think about leaving all this behind? Clara asked, crouching beside him. Sometimes, but I built this land with my own hands. It's not much, but it's mine. She studied him, the way his jaw was set when he concentrated. There was a steadiness in him, a kind of weight that made her feel less like she was drifting. I don't want charity, she said. Then don't take it, he said, standing and offering her the rabbit. Take a place. She took it without a word. They rode back under a pink-streaked sky, the prairie wide and open around them. As they neared the house, the windows glowed with lamplight. Inside, Leo was curled beneath a quilt. The dog lay near the hearth, its tail thumping once. Clara looked at Lucas, her voice low. "You meant what you said about a union?" "I do." She nodded, slow and sure. "Not yet. But I'm considering it." Lucas tipped his hat. "Take all the time you need. I'll still be here." And for the first time in a while, she could say that felt like a promise that might hold. By the end of the week, the wind had shifted. It hadn't turned cold yet, but the smell of dry leaves and smoke drifted through the cottonwoods, a warning of what was ahead. Clara stood outside the barn, watching Lucas hitch the buckboard for the trip into town. "Leo's old enough to watch the house," she said, adjusting her shawl. "He's a careful boy. I left him a bucket of water and a full ash bucket." "You trust him with it?" Lucas asked. "He knows what to do if the wind blows a spark," she said. He gave a short nod. "All right. You ride up front." She climbed into the seat beside him, and they set off without another word. The road to town was long and rutted, and the prairie stretched wide on either side, golden and quiet. The town didn't rise suddenly. It just crept into view, worn and spare, with half the buildings leaning into the wind. Lucas pulled up beside the mercantile and tied off the reins. "You want to come in or wait?" "I'll come," she said. "I need to see the cloth with my own eyes." He held the door and she stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of kerosene and soap. Clara ran her fingertips across the bolts of fabric, pausing at a faded blue that reminded her of a sky before a storm. She held it up. "This one will do." Lucas returned with a coil of rope and an oil tin. "You sew by hand?" "My mother did," she said. "I watched enough." He took the cloth from her and added it to the pile. "Pick anything else." She looked toward the shelf of tin toys, then away. "No, Leo has his wooden horse. He doesn't need another toy." Lucas didn't press. He paid in coin and flour credits. Outside, he handed her the cloth. "You don't ask for much. I've learned not to," she said. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You don't have to live like you're waiting for the floor to fall through." She looked at him, her gaze steady. "You can't build on air." "I'm not asking you to," he said, "but I won't vanish." On the ride back, clouds gathered low over the hills. Clara tucked the cloth beneath her coat. When they reached the homestead, Leo was on the porch, a small kettle on his lap, a sense of quiet authority in his posture. That night, Clara worked by firelight, her stitches even, and her movements steady. Leo slept beside her, curled with a book she'd borrowed from Lucas's shelf. Her children were warm, fed. A soft knock came at the door. It was Lucas. He held a tin cup. "I brought you something," he said, handing it over. She sipped. It was cider, warm and sharp. "You ever think about what comes after all this?" she asked. She stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed against the chill. "I've been the wife of a man who needed tending. I won't be that again." "I wouldn't ask it," he said. "I want a partner." The quiet between them wasn't fragile now. It was full of something waiting to turn real. "Ask me again," she said. "I will." She reached out, touching his sleeve. "Thank you. For the cloth. You'll make something good out of it." She watched him walk back across the yard. When she stepped back inside, Leo stirred and turned toward her in his sleep. She pulled the quilt higher over them all. Outside, the wind picked up, but the walls held. The first frost came overnight, silvering the grass and leaving the pump handle stiff with ice. Clara rose before light, pulling Leo's coat around his shoulders. She moved through the dark with quiet hands, easing the door open without waking them. Lucas was outside, splitting wood by lantern glow. He paused when she stepped into the yard, breath rising in thin clouds. "Couldn't sleep," he said, setting the axe into the stump. She took the next log and braced it. They worked without speaking for a while. The sun eased above the trees. "I used to dream of places with no winter," she said. "You ever think of going south?" "I did once, but I don't want to chase something I've never seen." After breakfast, Luke pulled on his coat. "I'll be down by the lower pasture. The cattle scattered after that wind last night." She nodded. "I'll walk the creek edge, get the last of the herbs before the ground locks." He paused at the door. "Take the rifle. The snows bring coyotes hungry enough to try anything." "I will." By late morning, Clara waded knee-deep in cattails and frostbitten thistle. She didn't hear the horse until it was close. Hand on her rifle, she turned. "Lucas. Found a calf caught in the fence," he said. "Freed it, but the wire's a mess." She brushed frost from her skirt. "I'll help mend it." At the slope, the wire coiled like a snake. Lucas anchored it while Clara held the slack. Barbs nicked her hands. She didn't flinch. "I wouldn't have expected this from the girl I caught stealing eggs," he said. "Nor I. A man who offered a choice," she answered. "I meant it then. Still do." She met his eyes, wind tugging a loose strand of hair. "I know, that's why I'm still here." They walked back slowly, horses trailing. The sun dipped low, hills glowing amber. "I've been thinking," Clara said at the yard. "I chose work over union because it was all I knew. But that doesn't mean I never thought of the other. You're thinking of it now." She nodded. "If it's still on offer. I've no ring or ceremony planned. I don't need either, only a place that won't slip away." He drew a leather cord from his coat. "My mother braided this for my father. He gave it to me when I left home." She took it, their fingers brushing. "It's enough." Lucas tied it around her wrist. "Then you're mine if you want it." "I do." The last sun lit her face. For the first time since Texas, she smiled without fear. Inside, the children slept by the hearth. Clara covered them, then stepped to the doorway. Lucas stood outside, staring toward the ridge. She slipped her hand into his. "I'll take your name tomorrow," she said. "Tonight, let me stand beside you." He turned his palm and held on. The judge rode out the morning after the first snow, a small book under his arm. Lucas led him inside, where Clara waited by the fire in her mother's faded sage dress. No lace, no crowd, just clean children and the scent of boiled apples. When asked if she took Lucas freely, she nodded. His quiet yes matched hers. The judge left with a sack of flour and jar of honey. Wind picked up, snow threatened. Inside, Clara ladled stew while Lucas stirred the fire. They ate cross-legged on the floor, the wooden horse rocking across the boards. Warmth settled deeper than the stove. Later, lantern in hand, Lucas said, "I built this place hoping someone might stay. Most days I didn't think anyone would. I never thought I'd want to stay again," Clara said. "But you do." "I do." He drew her close, certain now of what he held. That night, while the wind howled, the walls stood still. By spring the creek ran full. Leo trailed Lucas in the barn. Clara planted herbs by the porch, her voice lighter than in years. They rarely spoke of the past. What mattered was the soil beneath their boots, the roof that held, the steady love in their hands. One evening Clara leaned against the door frame, warmth of the house at her back, Leo laughing by the well. She crossed the yard barefoot and wrapped her arms around Lucas. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing me staying can be safe." He rested his chin on her hair. "You taught me that too." Years later, townsfolk spoke of the McCains as quiet people whose doors were always open. No child turned away, no neighbor left hungry. Each winter, as snow lay thick and silent, Clara stood beside Lucas, her hand in his, knowing they hadn't just survived, they'd built a life.